Welcome, everyone. We're going to launch the event now. So thank you for gathering. My name is Timothy Brick. I work as the rector or provost of this university, and it is my honor to welcome all of you here in our premises to kick off the very exciting workshop, summer school in art therapy and in general, summer school dedicated to a very important topic of therapy and mental health and mutual support. I have prepared a small speech just to emphasize that such programs are very important for us. This baseball hat has a particular story behind it. It was presented to me by my friends from UNICEF Foundation. And the drawing here was made by a little kid who experienced war. You know, there was a group of kids who experienced war. They were brought to a special facility with experts and psychologists to help them to deal with trauma. And art therapy was one of the methods which they used. And the drawings were then printed on hats and T-shirts. And there was a whole exhibition dedicated to this art created by kids. And, you know, it looks like a funny hat with a pink collar and funny image on it. But it's actually a symbol of, you know, all the trauma and all the sorrow which our society goes through. And, you know, and this little gift brought a lot of emotions to me. And I'm very, you know, in a way, of course, I'm sad because of it and because of war and because of the fact that I have to speak about it. But also I'm very happy that we have a gathering of people like you, people who understand the necessity of therapy, necessity of psychological treatment. And I feel confident that with you and with your support, you know, as a community, we can come together and we can provide new tools and new methods to more and more experts in Ukraine who can then go to the field and help others, maybe kids, maybe adults, to deal with the trauma of this war. And for our university, it is very crucial to support such endeavors and to support educational programs and workshops. This particular event is co-organized by many institutions. You can see all of them on the slide. On our end, this event was co-organized with two programs. One is in social psychology and another is in memory studies. We launched these programs during the invasion because we sincerely believe that education, science, research matters a lot, even during the war. We know from our own experience and we know from research that human capital matters. Whenever human capital is something that you can measure, and whenever you see more human capital in Ukraine, you also see more resilience and more recovery. But also social capital matters. We also see it in our research that how people have bonds with each other, social trust, mutual support. It also matters a lot. Ukraine is resilient in places with higher social capital. And I think that what you do is also very important and very honorable because you actually bring, you help other people to cope with this trauma and you help them to build ties and bonds with others. So I want to say thank you, all of you, for coming here, for organizing this event, for having it at KC for the next few days. I want to say thank you for being here with us, and I wish you a successful workshop, and I hope to see you more on such events. So that's it. Thank you for being here, and I pass the microphone to our colleagues, to our friends, to launch the event and to tell a bit more about it. So please, the floor is yours. Yeah.
Hello, welcome. Вітаємо. Yay! I apologize that I do not speak Ukrainian, which feels terrible here in Kyiv, but I'm very grateful that you will allow me to speak in English. My name is Darren Abrahams. I'm a trauma therapist, a musician, and a trainer, and I'm part of the team, the coalition here, bringing this workshop and this summer school together. My role this evening is to be a moderator and to introduce you to the wonderful people that we have here on our panel, and also one who will be joining us via Zoom from Scotland. But first of all, I wish to introduce Weronika Skliarova, who is the director of Art Dot, and Weronika is the reason we are here. And I'm going to ask Weronika some questions so that she can tell you more about herself. So I'd love you to share more about yourself and your work with Art Dot.
Can I ask for the presentation if someone, yeah. Thank you, Darren. At first, I want to, okay. I just wanted to underline our partners who made it happen with us. It's definitely Kyiv School of Economy. Thank you for hosting the event. It's Opera Circus, and especially Tina, Ellen Lee, who really worked hard to make it happen. Henry Redwood and King's College London, but also we have amazing partners here, British Council, and they support a lot of our participants. They help them to be in our summer school for those who are not based in Kyiv, and it's huge, 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 and we are very thankful for them. Also, Ukrainian Psychological Association, they help to spread information all around and to invite all of you here. We have a lot of partners and contributors in general, but it's the most crucial people who I want to be thankful for. Where this echo came from. Okay, my voice maybe sound a bit weird now from this point of view. Yes, I'm head of NGO Art Dot, and we are mostly working with art and art education, but since full-scale invasion, we also work with health practices, not only art therapy, but mostly art therapy. We are making the next slide I can. Yes, so it's aims of the organization. And I can see that Zoom is there, so maybe we will have our Najel Osborn speaker with us today. So the aim of organization is to emphasize and be a platform for arts and art education, but also for those who are helping people. If you will Google our website, Art Therapy Force, you can find a lot of nice lectures and educational program for 5 universities around Ukraine. I can see our amazing partner from Kharkiv. Yulia, thank you for being with us. It's Kharkiv Conservatoire. We are working with music therapists there that help people in hospitals in Kharkiv, but not only. As NGO, we have 2 major programs. It's Art Therapy Force, which is educational platform and practical help in art therapy, but also Parade Fest. It's our huge major project. It was a festival. I think it was already festival in Kharkiv. The aim of the festival was claiming the rights to the city with the different art tools. We are working with memory practices from artistic perspective, but also we mostly worked with the civic awareness, with the raising of civic awareness and this political field, but also using the soft power and culture diplomacy and art practices. It's our main programs. You can see innovations and you can see weird word medicine for art organization. And we are working with VR methods in hospitals. We are working with collaborating with X system. It's treating kids and soldiers who faced epilepsy with the special music treatment, but also we are working like in general, we called it multimodal approach in art therapy with different art practices like theater, music, different fine arts to help people. I will not spot the other our fields. We also working with education, and this our summer school is huge and important step in making the trauma-informed art approaches more visible in general. And we are working already with this with Najel Osborn, who will be with us today, I hope, and he will talk about his program that we started between 5 universities in Ukraine, all over the Ukraine, in Lviv, Kropivnitsky, Ivano-Frankivsk, Kharkiv, and it's really important because you're working with the pedagogical universities as well as our arts universities, helping them to start their own programs, 1 year or 2 years programs inside universities. you can see this information, but also you can find it on our website. You can see more precisely what is Family Art Retreat Project, what is Kids Art Retreat camps, and what are different camps and activities that we are providing, because we are not only making it visible, but we are also make a lot of public information from psychologists. We are working on evidence-based with our art therapeutical approaches, because it's really important to prove people that, okay, art therapy is not only something fun or the tool that can bring joy to people, but it's also very important tool to help reunite families, to help IDPs to work with their generational trauma problems. But yeah, it's much more than only fun. And Christopher will tell much more about this. So as per Fest, we are working mostly as a cultural diplomacy. In the cultural diplomacy field, we present our works on Liverpool Theatre Festival. We made Ukrainian Pavilion in Avignon Theatre Festival. So it's also a huge, huge part of our work to show Ukrainians' resistance and resilience abroad, not only us being victim of like bloody invasion, but also about our dignity and strength. And we want to underline it with our work. Most of these projects you can find in Parade Fest website. It's a lot of videos. We helped artists to work through COVID problems. We made methodological materials for theaters, how to continue the work during the COVID. And until now, these methodological materials are very relevant. People can use them, especially if it's like small town, they don't have venue access or how to make theater from the box. And all the projects that we have started as a Parade Fest now give us tools and possibilities to continue this art therapeutical work and to spread it all around the smaller towns and villages all around the Ukraine. Our partners and my contacts. So I was really like brief in this presentation because I'm not really feel okay to advertise our work, because I know most of you in the audience have the similar practices, and Ukraine we are very rich with our civic society and with our civic practices, and it's a lot that we can study from, and it's a lot that we can bring up to think about how we can turn these practices, these tools, our experience into policies, how we can help our government to support us and to make it more visible in the scale of whole Ukraine. I really hope that our work in this summer school will be not only productive from educational perspective, from our amazing lecturers that I'm really proud to be among here, but also we will map the milestones and problems. We will think about what crises and what problems we are facing as a practitioners, and how we can support each other, how we can support our work in shelters for IDP people, in orphanages, and in all different venues and places where we have to work now. It's our aim, because I'm sorry, but now our artistic tools become our weapon to protect our mental health as a society. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Veronica. It's going to be Christopher. Yes. Thank you. Your work is so inspiring, and we're very honored to be here with you. And thank you for inviting us and bringing us here. It is a huge pleasure now to introduce Christopher Bailey, who is Arts and Health Lead for the World Health Organization. Handing over to you and your amazing expertise and beautiful personality.
There was a man of double deed who sowed his garden full of seed. When the seed began to grow, 'twas like a garden filled with snow. When the snow began to fall, 'twas like some birds upon the wall. When the birds began to fly, 'twas like a shipwreck in the sky. When the sky began to crack, 'twas like a stick upon my back. When my back began to smart, 'twas like a bent knife in my heart. When my heart began to bleed, then I was dead and dead indeed. When my heart began to bleed, then I was dead and dead indeed. That was a song. That was a song that my father sang to me when I was a boy to help me go to sleep at night. Yes. And many years later, I remember asking him, you know that song about the birds on the wall and the shipwreck in the sky and all of that? Why did you sing that to me? And he said, well, I don't know. My father sang it to me. And I said, well, what does it mean? And he goes, it means nothing. It's nonsense. It doesn't mean anything. But it's kind of haunted me, over the years. What was that song? What does it mean? My father was an artist. My father comes from Irish ancestry, and he and his father before him were all some form of artist, singers, painters, one sort or another. It's a theme that runs through our family, and many of them were extremely charming and had, beautiful blue eyes and were quite charming with the women and all that, and beautiful singers. But another trend that ran in my family was alcoholism. And my father had an alcohol problem. His father did, his father before him. I think one of my greatest accomplishments is not being the arts and health lead at the World Health Organization, but I don't drink. And my sons don't drink. So I have broken the chain. Where did that alcoholism come from? Was it related in any way to the artistic aspect of my family? The other aspect that I think I do embody is a political activism. My great-grandfather was a co-founder of the American Civil Liberties Union. My grandfather and grandmother met at a union rally in New York City. I think part of that social responsibility was another theme in our family, but why? And I would ask my father these questions, but alcoholics often are not giving with information about the past, or if you do get some, how reliable is it? I don't know. So it was a mystery in my family. And my youngest son at one point went on one of these websites to learn about our family history. And as it turns out, the Irish side of my family came from a town in Northern Ireland called Antrim, which is north of Belfast. And at around the time of the enclosure movement, my family, who were farmers working the land, were evicted from their land as part of the enclosure movement. And they were swallowed up, as far as we can tell, according to the website, into the Industrial Revolution in England, and then eventually came to the US and became labor organizers. And I have to think, based on the faint pattern, and it's hard to know exactly, that their experience with losing their land, of being forcibly displaced, of being their culture swallowed up in the Industrial Revolution, maybe artistic representation was a way of coping. Maybe the alcohol was a way of coping. Maybe the trauma of that cemented both those things into their DNA. Maybe the political activism was part of that experience. I don't know. I, at WHO, run the Arts and Health program, and one of the themes that we're interested in is transgenerational trauma. I became interested in coming to the Ukraine. First of all, I was invited by Veronica's NGO and the Ministry of Culture to look at some of the work that we've been doing around the world, in Iraq with Yazidi women, in Ireland with transgenerational trauma from the Troubles, with Native Americans and their transgenerational trauma. All of them have their own stories and their own aspects. But I was interested in not just fulfilling the request from the ministry of providing technical assistance on the approaches that we've developed. I was also interested in what's happening organically already here. Some of the programs that Veronica mentioned, some of the programs that are already existing in the country, but also, aside from the programs, the organic, authentic response of the Ukrainian people to this moment of seeing a resurgence of the arts, and not just escapism from the Troubles. That's part of it, I suppose. But there's a play in Kyiv right now that's based on a 19th century Ukrainian novel that apparently is very depressing, and people are lining up to it. And instead of being told how to feel, it's actually processing the difficult and ambivalent feelings of this moment right now. And that's one of the keys to art therapy. If somebody is sad, you don't play happy music. If somebody is agitated, you don't play calming music. You meet them where they are. And if I were to play calming music to someone who is agitated, that might actually infuriate them, because what it's saying is you're not listening. But if I play agitated music, then there's an acknowledgement of I am listening, and we can take a journey together. And I don't know where that destination is. That's entirely your creation. That's your journey. I was also affected by the story of Ukraine itself. At WHO, next month marks the anniversary of MH17, the plane that was shot down over eastern Ukraine on the way to Kuala Lumpur. What people don't realize is that many of the passengers on that plane, including 10 British citizens, were on the way to an AIDS conference in Kuala Lumpur, and we lost a generation of AIDS researchers, including some of my best friends at WHO. So these things mean a lot. Just as the Ukraine invited me to share some of the practices recently, I was invited by Ireland to work with some of their arts therapy professionals and see firsthand some of the programs they were doing to try and work on transgenerational trauma in the context of the Troubles. And what I saw was fascinating, because they have a very innovative social prescribing effort there, where they use, amongst other things, the feeling of awe to address the feelings of dissociation that comes with trauma. It's a reconnecting ability. So, for instance, you might be prescribed by a link worker in the health system to go to a concert, go to a play, or even just go to an intensely beautiful landscape. And what happens is when you are experiencing something incredibly beautiful that is bigger than yourself, instead of feeling diminished, you suddenly feel that you are a small but vital part of a larger whole. And you're rewarded with that with a shot of oxytocin, the bonding hormone, which gives you that sense of elation that comes with awe. And it literally has the effect of reconnecting you to yourself, to each other, and to the world around you. It has a positive effect. Now, what is transgenerational trauma? There was a study done last year that was published in, I believe, Nature magazine, studying mice. And what they did was they exposed the mice to non-lethal but painful electric shocks, and also the smell of an almond. And the reason why they chose an almond is because they know what are the olfactory sensors specific to almond smell. And what they discovered was that within a short time of repeated electric shocks, the mice began to develop extra olfactory sensors for almonds. They became hypersensitive to that smell because of the intense aversion that's the association with the electric shock created. All that's not surprising. What is surprising is that the first generation of offspring inherited the extra olfactory almond sensors and had an intense, agitated response to that almond smell without ever experiencing an electric shock. The transgenerational trauma was written into the DNA of the first generation of the mice. So when you have a collective traumatic experience, yes, we want to deal with responding to the trauma of the individuals who have been physically harmed and mentally harmed in the trauma, but it's also a genetic bomb that's being dropped on the unborn children. I was talking with one art therapist in Derry in Northern Ireland, and she personally experienced a bombing in a local pub that killed neighbors and family members. Her whole life has been dedicated to helping people with trauma and transgenerational trauma, but she herself managed the symptoms but never quite eliminated them. And then she began to see the symptoms in her children who had never experienced any violence. And she came to me as the expert and asked, I've been trying to spare them the stories because I don't want to make it worse. I don't want to burden them. Was that the right thing to do? And I said, I don't know. It's really your choice. But I would think that if I were a child or a young adult experiencing things that were beyond my control, that were having a negative impact, I'd like to know why. I'd like to hear the stories, but you choose the time. There is something about that moment of catharsis, that deep aesthetic experience, that actually creates a neurological change. Just as trauma itself may disrupt our sense of proprioception, which disrupts our sense of connection to ourselves. When you've experienced violence, when you've experienced an accident or an illness, I myself had cancer a number of years ago, and I remember waking up from the emergency operation, and I literally had the sensation of my spirit floating above the hospital room, looking down on my body. My spirit had fled my body because it was no longer a safe place to be. Neurologically, what was happening was that my proprioception, the mapping that the brain does to my body that gives me a sense of ownership of my body, had been short-circuited. This is extremely common for anyone who has experienced trauma. With the Yazidi women that we worked with in northern Iraq, they described the same thing, that after their experience, they no longer felt that their body was a safe place to be. So what can coax you back? Oftentimes it's, for me, looking out the window of the hospital room, seeing the image of a tree and a sign of life, looking at the wall and seeing a painting and being able to focus my attention on something outside of myself. To have the surgeon come in and describe what had happened, and I was in no state to hear, but then he would place his hand on my shoulder, and I could feel the warmth of his palm, and that physical contact acted almost like a tether to coax my spirit back. When Aristotle defined catharsis, he called it that moment of shock and awe, that word again. Shock is a surprise. It's when you come to that point of the revelation and you didn't see it coming, and you're shocked by what had happened. Awe, in the context of an ancient Greek tragedy, is that moment of inevitability, when all the clues leading up to that revelation were there, you just simply didn't see it, and suddenly the pattern is revealed. And when you think about something being both a surprise and inevitable, it's a contradiction. And that contradiction creates a cognitive dissonance in the brain and a neurological vacuum. And that vacuum is filled with a new neural pathway. And we are rewarded with that shot of oxytocin. It's a learning moment. It's an opportunity for change. And what that change is not predicted by the author. It's done through the filter of your own imagination, your own life experience. And that's why art is essentially enabling, because it's about giving you the autonomy to imagine your way forward. Carl Jung had a quote where he said, "Loneliness is not the absence of people. Loneliness is the inability to express what matters to you most." And that is the job of the artist. So I'm in Ireland and I'm hearing about all these practices, particularly in the Western counties, and they're absolutely fascinating. We're working with the traveler community and their experience of transgenerational trauma, that their dissociation from Irish society goes all the way back to the famine in the 1830s, and how through the use of the arts, efforts were being done to honor their cultural practices, but also make sure that they became part of the health system so they could receive the care that they needed. Over and over again, examples of different types of transgenerational trauma, and how, in that case, using the traditional art form of quilting, of having a quilting circle of the women in the community, and over the quilting talking about, how are you doing? And when health issues would come up, being able to guide them to services that could help support them. So at one point somebody said, "Oh, Bailey, that's Irish, isn't it?" And I said, "Well, if you're referring to the Irish cream, I don't think that's Irish, actually. That's a marketing thing. But yes, my family comes from Antrim." And they said, "Well, do you still have people there?" And I said, "I don't know. All the records were burnt in the Civil War. I have no idea." And so my colleague, who was at Queen's College, said, "Well, why don't we go? Let's just see what we can find." So we went there and we didn't know what we would find. And we're driving around and there's these row houses and, a chippy and, not just a petrol station. There's not much, actually. So we look on Google Maps and we see something called Antrim Castle. And so we drive there and there are these beautiful grounds, a park. We're seeing joggers and young mothers with prams and all that. But there's no castle. And so we started asking people in the park who have lived there for years, where's the castle? And they said, there's a castle? And so then we see a hill and we climb up the hill and we see this, the landscape of the churches and the houses and the countryside behind it, but no castle. And then I see down below this ruined wall of stones and a flock of birds on it. And we approach it and I find this little plaque saying, these are the ruins of Antrim Castle that were burnt in 1923. And this is all that remains. And at that moment, the flock of birds flew up into the sky. And in my distorted glaucomic vision, I saw a shipwreck. And I thought of my father's song. And so I did what any good researcher will do. I did a Google search. And I found that that song was the first published nursery rhyme in English. And it came from Antrim. And I thought about each image of the song, of the snow and the birds and the shipwreck in the sky. And I realized, for me, my meaning was revealed. Those were all moments of awe. That's what the song was about. I came to Antrim looking for some clue towards my discovering my past. And what I found was that my past was still there in the form of a song. And it was inside me all along. Thank you.
Do we know?
Do we have Najel Osborn with us on Zoom? No? Then Henry.
Yeah. Luckily, we have Henry Redwood, who is a lecturer in war studies from King's College London. Henry.
Thank you, Darren. An unenviable task to follow Chris, and I can promise you perhaps I won't sing and harm your ears in that capacity. I'll harm them in another way by offering, I guess, some brief thoughts about why it is that we're here together and what's bringing everyone in this room together and what we hope to get out of this week, where we hope to take steps together towards thinking through what the art of trauma might look like and how we can use artistic practices to respond to trauma, not just in Ukraine, but across the world. So my role is really to present this short outline of why we are here and to think through what's at stake in the conversations that we've started to have tonight, but we will continue to have throughout this week and in the years to come. I should also say, I've tried to translate some of the text to help you follow what I'm saying. Again, apologies that I'm speaking to you in English. I've used an AI translation software tool, so forgive the slips and inaccuracies in it, but hopefully it will help you follow some of the points that I hope to make. So really our work as a collective begins with quite a simple proposition, which is that in Ukraine and elsewhere, trauma is becoming a defining aspect of how people are experiencing the present. There's lots of statistics being bandied around what trauma prevalence rates in Ukraine look like, from as low as 20% to as high as 77%, which I think are still probably very conservative. But we know that everywhere else in the world, we're seeing this similar rise in experiences of trauma, whether it's youth-related mental health the ever-growing rise of domestic violence, gender-based violence, or conflicts elsewhere, like we're seeing in Gaza. And really, what we are suggesting, or what we believe, I think, as a collective, is that our current ways of imagining how we deal with this trauma, how we approach it, work through it towards a healthier way of being at an individual and collective level, are inadequate to the demands that this trauma brings to us, brings for us, to us. And this is in a number of ways that I think that our current approaches are inadequate. I think the first is that in Ukraine, but also elsewhere, we lack the infrastructure to provide the traditional models of intervention that we normally associate with trauma through psychotherapeutic modes of intervention. But I think more critically that lots of the ways in which we understand how we should respond to trauma are inadequate in and of themselves and come from quite a narrow way of thinking about what constitutes trauma and how it is that we should be responding to this. My own research, sorry, there's not a slide for this, I thought there was. My own research has traced these processes, these inadequacies, and how we often respond to trauma in war-affected communities. And wherever I've worked, whether or not it's Bosnia or Serbia or Rwanda, what we see is that time and time again, the ways in which we choose to respond to trauma, particularly at a collective level, are not only deeply inadequate, but frequently can make the problem worse, whether or not we're talking about the use of international courts or truth commissions or ideas about how we build a new state during and after war. These mechanisms frequently force participants in the process to relive their trauma in a way that is not often cathartic, as we have promised, but is deeply re-traumatizing and reproduces lots of the inequalities and structures in society that caused the trauma in the first place. So we need to rethink as a collective how it is we understand trauma and how it is that we come to approach it and work towards a better form of communal future. I'm a lecturer in war studies. Perhaps thinking about the arts is not the most immediate thing that someone would associate with war studies from somewhere like King's College London. But why I turned to the arts as a mode of practice is because I became increasingly frustrated with the fact that people in my field were constantly telling us what was wrong with international courts, with truth commissions, with how we can approach trauma, but they were not offering us any meaningful suggestions about how we might do this otherwise. And what I found when I turned to artistic and creative spaces was this possibility of imagining this otherwise way of doing things, this otherwise way of being and approaching trauma. And I think this is one thing that unites everyone on this panel, and hopefully the colleagues that we're going to be working with throughout this week, is that we all believe that the arts have the capacity to offer at least part of the solution to how it is that we can process trauma in a more transformative and emancipatory way. And this isn't a hypothetical, right? This isn't just a theoretical exercise where we can think through this problem from a new lens and come up with new terms like trauma-informed care that can perhaps help us imagine this from a new theoretical stance. But this is already happening. And whilst I've also seen disastrous instances of international interventions in all of the countries that I've already listed, I've also always seen creative people and artists that are working towards creating this new way of being, this new way of intervening, and I've seen the effects of this in real life, and I think that's also something that underpins everything that we do as a collective, and everything that I think you've already just seen is that this is an evidence-based practice, right? We're not just willfully hoping that the arts can do something differently. We know that it's doing something different, and we see it in our work on a regular basis. Why are we here specifically in Kyiv School of Economics and in Ukraine? And I mean, there's lots of answers to that question, but one of them is that this sort of creative, transformative reimagining of what it means to approach trauma is already taking place here. today. And we've already started hearing some of it with the amazing work of people like Veronica and Art Dot. But there is already this a sea of expertise that is being developed in this context that we as outsiders can learn from and rethink our own practice and ways of intervening with trauma in our own settings. And that is sort of at the heart of what we want to do throughout this summer school and beyond, is continue what has already been a collaborative dialogue and collective way of working around rethinking practices associated with processing and working through trauma by bringing in more people into the fold and listening to more experiences of how you are all using your creative practices in order to respond to the challenges that we are facing in the present day. So this is very much a collaborative exercise that cannot be anything other than that for it to be successful. The other thing that unifies all of the examples of where I've seen this work fail, and it does often fail, is where we base our practice around international experts that swoop into a context without meaningfully understanding what's happening and impose our understanding of what trauma looks like in that context and how we should respond to it. And that doesn't work, and it's never worked, and it won't ever work, right? For the very fundamental reason that there's not a meaningful understanding of the problem that is being solved, nor of the creative capacity of communities on the ground to respond to it. So this is an exercise where we want to engage in a mutual dialogue to work together to create this collective vanguard where we can push forward this idea of trauma-informed arts practice, which I think can be of benefit not only to Ukrainians in the present moment, but also trauma-affected communities worldwide. This isn't going to be an easy process. This way of thinking can be challenging for institutions and ways of thinking. It's fundamentally non-hierarchical in its nature. And everywhere we look in the world, we see hierarchies that are not interested in changing. But I think that together we can we can continue this process of thinking through how we can galvanize support around this idea, develop a better understanding of what that idea is, and look to invoke real change, both within the Ukraine and beyond. So I guess my message is one of ultimately hope that I believe that we have the capacity to do this. And we just need to work collectively to effectively make that a reality in the future. Thank you.
Do we have Nigel? No. Then it's down to me. So Veronica's asked me to step into some very big shoes. Najel Osborn, who we were hoping was going to be joining us via Zoom from Scotland, is the pioneer in this field of work and has been active in so many different arenas of conflict around the world for about 4 decades. I had the huge pleasure of meeting Nigel in 2005 on a summer camp in Bosnia, working with young people who had been through war, through music. And through that experience of working with Nigel for many years, it has completely informed my own work and my practice. My previous training was as a professional opera singer. And because of the work that I've done with Nigel, I then trained to become a trauma therapist. And now my work is around the combination of performing arts practice and a real deep understanding of trauma, not as a cognitive intellectual experience, but as a embodied experience of something that happens in our bodies. Nigel taught me that when we work with music, particularly in trauma, we are interacting with the same systems in our bodies and beyond that are disrupted by trauma. Trauma is a biological experience. It changes our bodies. It changes our nervous systems. It changes our heartbeat, our breathing, the kinds of chemicals that are introduced into the bloodstream. All these things shift and change when we go through experiences that are overwhelming for our nervous systems. Trauma is a psychological experience. It changes our mood, our emotions, the way that we see the world. And trauma is a social experience. It fragments, it isolates, it tears us apart. It changes our identities in ways that we don't always choose. The wonderful thing about music is that it does the same things, and art in general. My expertise is music. I'll talk about music. Music also gets into the nervous system. It changes the heartbeat. It changes the breathing. It changes the chemicals we release into the bloodstream. Trauma gets into our psychology. Music gets into our psychology and changes our mood, changes our emotions. As Christopher says, enhances emotions that we already have and wish to process. And music is social. It brings us together. When we co-create music, then we renegotiate our identities. We are no longer who we were outside the room, but we can choose to be a composer, to be a guitarist, to be a vocalist, to be a poet, to be an artist. All these things are available to us as we interact with the creative arts. And that's why this is the most effective way of really working at the depths of what it means to be overwhelmed by life experience. And the important thing is that we do it together, that is co-created, that we make it together, that we create it together, and that we don't necessarily know what the outcome is going to be, but that we create spaces together in which we create outcomes together, where an outcome emerges from the people who are present in the room. So I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to invite you into a musical experience. Even more. Great. Belle mamma, eh. Belle mamma, eh. Belle mamma, eh. Belle mamma, belle mamma, eh. Belle mamma, belle mamma, eh. Belle mamma, belle mamma, belle mamma, belle mamma, belle mamma, belle mamma. Belle mamma, belle mamma, belle mamma, belle mamma. Belle mamma, 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 belle mamma. Belle mamma, belle mamma, belle mamma, belle mamma. Belle mamma, 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 belle mamma. Belle mamma, belle mamma, belle mamma, belle mamma, belle mamma, belle mamma, belle mamma. What is an even more regulated thing than music? That's yes. I was thinking more about food, which I see at the back. It's not for us.
It's for us, but maybe we have time for questions.
Amazing. Yes. Exactly.
Grocery.
Shall I run around? Who has a question? Yes.
Okay, I remembered how I experienced like art therapy in 2022. Well, I had a strong desire to make a little trip, a travel, and I went to Chernivtsi, and somehow I found out that there was an organ music concert in a local church, and I went there, and some compositions, some songs were very sad, and somehow I believe I relieved this that trauma I had in the beginning of a full-scale invasion. So I think it was like it helped me, like this sad songs. And of course there was a very strong song of Bach. He's the most known, his song organ. I don't remember how it's called, but I think it's also helped me. So I think my question is, when you had a trauma and you hear sad music, well, it helps you to relieve this trauma and maybe solve it, because if you ignore your problem, you can't solve them, I think. Thank you.
Question?
Darren, you have a really good question.
you say more about if I'm right?
Yeah. I think, Krista, this might be one for you. Do you want,
Chris, very brief.
yeah.
You're right.
Do you want to use the microphone?
No. Yes, I think it goes back to the WHO definition of mental health, which is not just about the elimination of mental illness or symptoms. It's about your ability to cope. It's about your ability to practice your skills to the highest individual level. It's about your ability to be productive, contributing and helping be part of community. It's about being able to acknowledge and celebrate moments of joy. If you can do all of these things, you are mentally healthy regardless of what diagnosable condition you have. And I think the arts in many ways have evolved to do exactly these things. In many cases, I think I'm particularly interested in music and its ability to literally at a biochemical and neurological level form community. We just felt it in that singing exercise. As part of our program in the Arts and Health Lab that I helped found, in Lithuania next week, there's going to be a convening of choirs from around the world. It happens every 4 years. And this year, the organizers gave us permission to use MRIs and EEGs to actually measure the physiological effects of singing together. And it has a way of letting you express your emotions, having a cathartic release, but also, as Darren pointed out, you match sound to each other. Your heartbeats begin to synchronize. The mirror neurons in your brain begin to mirror each other. The connection that happens between people who sing together is at many levels, physiologically, mentally, emotionally. And you come away from that experience having formed community. And so just as trauma, and we sometimes overemphasize this, just as trauma disconnects us, the arts connect us at the same physiological level.
More questions?
We have here. We have here.
Sorry, I'm gonna make this as quick as possible. My name is Monica. I come from just right outside Boston. I'm here because I grew up in the States, but my brother, who's lived in Ukraine all his life, is currently part of the whole system of, you know, like fighting for the country and is on the front lines. So it's very, very personal. And I can remember on that very day, the folks that reached out to me the fastest were those who were impacted by their own story and war itself. And I can remember feeling that exact sense of community and togetherness from folks who had gone through war, whether it was Bosnia, whether it was Afghanistan, folks who have been at war or have had families who've been impacted by war, were the ones that I felt were on the same level or would truly understand me. That got me thinking, in my practice and where I work currently at the Museum of Fine Arts Boston, we also have, programs that are related to the arts, and it's about dealing with trauma. It's about dealing with communities and finding ways of them expressing themselves and all of that. Artful healing, artful healing and restorative art. So two very different programs, that it's very similar in the same idea of using art as a way to coping with stress, trauma, all of that, with the end result being somewhat similar. But it got me thinking in this time, in this era where there's so much going on when it comes to wars, conflict, everything's quite different. Everyone's got a story. Everything has a unique situation to it. And it got me thinking about therapy, right? And it got me thinking about like that very moment of those who reached out to me. I felt that connectivity because they went through the same thing. It wasn't about the common man, which I really appreciated it, but it felt powerful hearing it from folks who have gone through it themselves. My question to you, with all of that, how do you decide who gets to be the trauma-informed professional? How do you decide who comes into this space? And I know the arts is really important, and it's definitely a tool to bring out and to help and to really liberate or help process the experience. But how do you decide? What is your what are your thoughts on who do you decide that can come into the space and be able to speak to, let's say, Ukrainians or folks in who have dealt with it in Syria or Gaza or Israel, or because everyone has an individual story, an individual need, and a different process of understanding, especially in a world where there's a very much of a trauma sort of like competition. I hate to say it that way, really hate to say it that way, but I think it's really important for people to, but it's important for people to understand that everyone, as you had mentioned, everyone comes from an intergenerational stress and trauma, and they process things differently. So it's quite different in ways of process. Anyway,
Can I answer?
That's it.
It's not, we are not deciding. It's like person decides. And we are working a lot in different veterans hospitals, and you can see a lot of rehabilitologists without limbs, because they decide that they really want to help. Obviously, it's also veterans, but they decide to go and help. And for me, I'm theater scientist. I decide to go and be, and I think it's not for us, but as we experience different experiences, yes, we experience experiences, obviously. And I think all our experiences are highly like valuable, and we have our own tools and ideas, and it's only this meaning in our heads that we want to help and we want to help this way. So it's not about us to decide. If I answered.
Can I say something as well? I completely hear what you're saying. It's very interesting. In my work, I've been thinking a lot about, you know, what it is that makes how do you do this work and why do you do this work? And I think that our role as the facilitator is to be able to create spaces where transformation can take place, but without holding on to what that transformation might be. So those people who are in the space who we are supporting decide what that transformation is. It emerges from them. However, there is a skill in holding that space. And those skills, there are multiple levels of of skill. I think that there's something very powerful about a skilled arts practitioner holding a space in which people can express themselves, because there's something about meeting people in the art that is really important. I think another really important element is the amount of work that practitioner has done on themselves. Because, as you say, we all have trauma in our nervous systems. We have generational trauma, we have collective trauma, we have individual trauma, and we bring it into the space with us. So as a facilitator, we have to be aware that we are doing that. And therefore, we have to work very hard on ourselves so that we don't allow our trauma to inform what's happening in the space already. We need to hold the space in safety. And to hold the space in safety means that we have to do work. We have to continuously do work on ourselves. So I think that is the difference between a skilled practitioner who is holding the transformative space and someone who is stepping into the transformative space to help. There is no, I believe anyone can do this work, but it's not just anyone that can do the work, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense, Darren. And just to build on I agree with everything you say, but part of what we're doing at WHO is at different levels. There's the health promotion level, where it's not the responsibility of an expert to do this change for you. It's something that you take ownership of yourself. The expert, as you say, can create a space that can help facilitate that process if needed, but it's in most cases not necessary. People on a daily basis, even if you don't think you're an artist, and you're using that art to create your narrative all the time. And the arts aren't going to cure the misfortune, but they may help you curate your life. Now at WHO, we're working with member states to actually establish certification criteria for different levels. So you might have an arts and health professional who is not a trained therapist, and there are certain roles and functions that person can do with a certain amount of paraprofessional training, or even a master's degree in some cases, but are not trained therapists. But part of that training is also to do the triage and recognize when that person needs to be referred to someone who's a trained therapist. And one of the projects that I'm working on with the mental health department at WHO, and we discussed it in the Ukraine office, is to build a set of tools to help artists who are not trained in any of this, to, when they find themselves in a situation, to be able to do some good in an evidence-based way, but also recognize where the boundaries are, where they should not go, and to help, particularly in a conflict zone, to help support their own mental health when they find themselves overwhelmed. What can they do? So the short answer is everyone who gets into this field self-selects. Nobody selects them. It's a calling. But once you have the calling, you have a choice of how much training do you want to enter into. And you don't have to do the training. There's much good you can do just being a sensitive human being practicing your art. But there's more good, different kinds of good that you can do with different levels of training. And what I hope to do with governments is to help standardize some of that certification so that we can compare apples to apples. And it's not to control, but it's to reduce the possibility of unintentional harm, but also to create a common understanding where people understand what the levels are and what they can do and do the most good.
Thank you. I think we should eat. We don't have any time. We don't have time for the questions, but you can come and ask, and we have like free time on the terrace. You free to grab wine or something and spend amazing evening together. Thank you for being here with us.